Dr. Grace Wusu walks in 15 minutes late, and she doesn't apologize for it with her body the way most latecomers do. No rushed steps. No apologetic half-smile at the usher. She walks like a woman who was invited and knows it, ash-gray hair catching the chandelier light as she crosses the threshold, a fitted emerald dress moving like water with each step. Across the room, Han Sunmi goes rigid the instant she sees her. "That's her," Sunmi whispers to her sister, venom barely held back. "That's the doctor." Her sister follows her gaze. "The one from the hospital, the one everyone's been." "Whispering about," Sunmi finishes. "Yes, that one." She's already moving, weaving between guests, nothing practiced left in the set of her jaw. Only Grace sees her coming. She doesn't move. She waits, the way she waits for test results she already suspects the answer to. The quartet keeps playing. Nobody else notices. Not the caterers. Not the cousins swapping gossip near the bar. Not even Minyi's own security stationed along the walls. Sunmi plants herself in front of Grace, close enough that conversations nearby die mid-sentence. "You have some nerve," Sunmi says. "Coming here tonight of all nights." Grace doesn't step back. "Mrs. Han, I was invited." "By who?" Sunmi's voice cracks upward. "My husband spent 6 weeks in that hospital of yours. 6 weeks. And the entire staff whispering about the pretty doctor who never left his side. Did you think I wouldn't hear about it?" "I was his physician," Grace says. "That's the job." "The job," Sunmi laughs, brittle. "Sitting at his bedside past visiting hours, holding his hand when the nurses said you didn't need to." "I held his hand because he was afraid, Mrs. Han, and fear doesn't clock out at the end of a shift." A pause, just long enough to let the words land before she continues. "If you have a complaint about his care, I'd be glad to walk you through his chart. If you have a complaint about something else, say it plainly instead of dressing it up as concern for his health." For a moment, neither woman moves. The quartet falters, one violinist half a beat behind the others, as if even the music senses something's about to break. Sunmi's hand moves before her mind catches up with it. Slap. The sound cracks across the marble floor. Somewhere near the bar, a woman gasps. A champagne flute shatters against tile, and for one suspended second that's the only sound in the room. Grace straightens slowly. She doesn't touch her cheek, though it's already blooming red. She doesn't cry, though her eyes sting with the reflexive sting of impact rather than emotion. She lifts her chin, meets Sunmi's gaze dead on. "You just slapped the woman who kept your husband breathing for 6 weeks, she says. "I hope whatever rumor you heard was worth it." Sunmi's hand is still raised, frozen midair like she hasn't fully processed what it just did. Across the room, Minyi hasn't moved from his chair since Grace walked in. His eyes haven't left her either, not even during the slap that just silenced 200 people. If a slap like that just made your stomach drop the way it made mine writing it, comment, SHE didn't flinch below, Queens. This story only gets heavier from here. Every guest expects him to cross the room in fury now, to defend his mother, to have security remove the doctor before the story spreads past these walls. It's what a Han does. It's what he's always done, every time, without exception. He doesn't do it. He rises slowly, buttons his jacket, walks, not toward his mother, but to a spot where he can see both women clearly. Nobody moves. Nobody breathes too loudly. A Han in quiet fury is a Han deciding something, and nobody in this room wants to know what. "Mother," quiet even, "sit down." Sunmi blinks, thrown by the request more than she'd ever admit. "Minyi, she came in here uninvited and—" "I said sit down." For the first time all night, Sunmi looks less like a woman defending her family's honor, and more like a woman realizing she's missed something enormous under her own roof. A long beat passes. Nobody in the ballroom says a word. Even the caterers have stopped moving, trays balanced midair like the whole room is holding its breath alongside her. He turns to Grace. "Are you all right?" "I've had worse nights, Mr. Han." A ripple moves through the crowd. "Mr. Han, not sir, not the deference every other guest uses around him. She says it like she's said it before, in rooms with far fewer witnesses. Sunmi's eyes dart between them, her son's stillness, the doctor's easy familiarity. Something cold settles low in her stomach. She's been asking the wrong question all evening. Not why is she here? How long has this been happening without me noticing? The party doesn't stop, but it changes shape, conversations shrinking to whispers, eyes cutting sideways instead of meeting directly. A cousin leans toward another near the dessert table. Since when does Minyi address hospital staff like that? Like he owes her something. A business partner mutters to his wife, not quite quiet enough. He hasn't taken his eyes off her since she walked through that door. Look at his face. I am looking at his face, the wife murmurs back. That's what worries me. Near the kitchen doors, Deja watches without a flicker of surprise. She's seen this look on Minyi before, 3 months ago, in a different building, under different lighting. The night he came home from 6 days of business in Busan, nobody was permitted to ask about. Her eyes flick, briefly, toward the private hallway leading to the east wing, toward a locked room only 3 people in this house are allowed to enter. If you've ever watched someone hide a truth in plain sight and known before they said a single word, comment, I saw it below, Queens. You already know exactly where this is going. Sunmi catches Deja's glance. You've been in that wing more than anyone else on staff. What do you know that I don't? Deja doesn't flinch. I know my job, Mrs. Han, nothing more than that. A beat of silence stretches between them, long enough to feel deliberate. Sunmi doesn't push further, not yet, but something in her expression files the moment away for later. 3 months earlier. A man is wheeled into the ICU under a false name, Officer Kim, gunshot wound to the lower abdomen, no family listed as emergency contact. Grace takes one look at the entry wound and knows. This isn't a mugging. This is retaliation. She's seen wounds like this before, on men who arrive with black cars idling outside instead of worried families in the waiting room. She doesn't ask the questions she already knows he won't answer. She works 6 hours in surgery, her hands moving with a precision that has nothing to do with fear. When he wakes, disoriented and furious at his own vulnerability, she's the one sitting beside the bed. Not a nurse doing rounds. Her, specifically. Reading his chart in the low light. You didn't have to stay, he says, voice hoarse and raw. You didn't have anyone else who would, she answers, not looking up. Silence settles between them, comfortable in a way neither of them expects it to be. What's your name? He asks, once the ventilator's gone and his voice is closer to his own. Dr. Grace Owusu. Grace, he says it slowly, testing the shape of it in his mouth. I won't forget that. You should focus on healing, Officer Kim, she says, an acknowledgement of the obvious lie in his name that she doesn't push on. You're not exhausted, he says. Tired people don't move like you just did. Tired people don't fight for 6 hours over a stranger who gave a fake name at intake. Grace glances up at that, meeting his eyes properly for the first time since he woke. Everyone deserves the same 6 hours, Officer Kim, real name or not. Something in his expression shifts, not gratitude exactly, something quieter and more dangerous than gratitude. Recognition. The particular ache of being treated like a person by someone who has every reason not to bother. He watches her check his chart, adjust his IV, move through the room like his name has never once made her flinch. Nobody in his world does that anymore. Nobody has in years. Outside the door, a nurse mentions offhand that hospital security just confirmed Officer Kim's real identity through a fingerprint flag. And whoever he really is, he's not a police officer. And the men waiting in the parking structure below already know that. Sunmi's voice cuts back through the memory, dragging the room fully into the present. Someone tell me what is happening right now. Minyi, I am done waiting. He exhales, slow and deliberate. For the first time all evening, something in his composure shifts, not breaking, choosing. Grace was my physician, he says, loud enough now that the entire ballroom hears it whether they want to or not. 4 months ago, I came to her hospital under another name because I couldn't come under my own. She saved my life, and she never once asked me a question I couldn't answer without lying to her. Gasps ripple outward through the crowd. A birthday party is very visibly becoming something else entirely, and nobody quite knows yet whether to keep smiling or start looking for the exits. You told me you were in Busan on business, Sunmi says, quieter now, some of the fury draining out of her. I lied, Minyi says simply, to protect you from knowing how close you came to planning a funeral instead of a birthday party. Sunmi's hand rises to her mouth. Around them, the guests have gone entirely silent, the string quartet long since stopped playing. Nobody moves for a long moment. The silence stretches, heavy enough that even the room's chandeliers seem to hold their light a little stiller. Grace, still standing at the center of the room where the slap first landed, finally speaks again, and this time she isn't defending herself. She's taking the floor. With respect, Mrs. Han, Grace says, voice carrying now, pitched deliberately for the whole room to hear. You slapped me tonight because of a rumor about your husband, a rumor that was never true. If you want to be angry with someone, be angry with your son for choosing silence. Don't put your hand on the woman who kept 2 members of your family alive. Sunmi opens her mouth, closes it again, the words simply not arriving. For the first time in the entire scene, she has nothing to say. 2, she finally repeats, barely above a whisper. You said 2. Your husband, Grace says, and your son. A pause, letting the words settle before she continues. I don't apologize for my job, Mrs. Han. I saved 2 men in your family without once asking either of them what they do for a living. You've made your point, Doctor. Sunmi's voice sharpens again, some of her pride reasserting itself even through the shame. You don't need to lecture me in front of my own guests. I wouldn't need to, Grace says evenly, if your hand hadn't done the talking first. A few guests shift, suddenly very interested in their champagne glasses. Someone near the back mutters something too quiet to catch, and a ripple of uncomfortable laughter breaks and dies just as fast. Queens, tell me, would you have stayed this calm after being struck in front of 200 strangers, or would you have said something the second her hand landed? Drop your answer below. Minyi steps closer to Grace now, close enough that the entire room understands this isn't the proximity of a host checking on an injured guest. Grace, low almost just for her, though the whole room strains to hear it anyway. You don't have to do this. Not tonight. Not like this in front of all of them. Grace turns to face him fully. I didn't come here tonight to hide, Minyi. I came because you asked me to, and I trusted that meant something real. If it doesn't. It means everything. He cuts her off, voice carrying an urgency the whole room can hear plainly. I asked you here because I'm done pretending the last 4 months didn't happen. Sunmi's hand goes to her mouth again. Minyi. I chose her, Mother. He doesn't look away from Grace even as he says it. Months ago, in a hospital bed I wasn't supposed to survive, when the only person who treated me like a man instead of a name people whisper in fear was her. I'm not going to keep choosing her in private while everyone in this house believes I'm still the man I was before I met her. He turns, just slightly, to face his mother directly. I know what this family expects of me. I know what you built this house to protect. But I've spent my whole life protecting a name that has never once protected me back the way she did in that hospital room. I won't apologize for that. Not to you, not to Director O, not to anyone standing in this ballroom tonight. A guest near the back of the room, one of his father's old business associates, mutters something low and cutting under his breath. 2 of Minyi's men stationed near the door go visibly tense at whatever they just overheard. The silence that follows isn't the same silence as before. This one has teeth in it. Forgive me for saying so, Kang Minyi, Director O says, stepping forward from the crowd, his voice smooth and pointed in equal measure. But a Han doesn't build a life with a woman who has no ties to this family, this business, or this country. Sentiment is a luxury men in our position don't get to keep. Grace steps forward before Minyi can respond. Director O, was it? You're right that I have no ties to your business, your family, or the particular kind of country you seem to think matters here. But I'd be careful implying that makes me the weak point in this room tonight. Director O's smile thins into something colder. Careful, doctor. This isn't a hospital ward where you get to make the rules. No, Grace says. And her voice doesn't rise, doesn't need to. It's a room full of people who have spent an entire evening performing loyalty most of them don't actually feel. I've watched 3 of your associates check their phones every single time Minnie's name came up tonight. Director O, including you, twice, in the last 10 minutes. I'm not the dangerous one standing here. I just happen to be the only person willing to say so out loud. A woman near the bar whispers something to her husband, glancing pointedly at Director O's face, now flushed with something between anger and exposure. You have no idea what you're talking about, O says, but there's a crack in the smoothness now, the first hint of a man improvising instead of performing. I know pressure when I see it, Director O, Grace says. I spent a decade reading vitals for a living. A racing pulse doesn't lie, even under a very good suit. If you already suspect Director O isn't just a rude guest, comment, he's hiding something below Queens. Trust me, you're right. Director O's jaw tightens visibly. Somewhere behind him, one of the associates Grace mentioned quietly begins moving toward the exit doors, and Minnie's security notices the movement immediately, 2 men peeling off from the wall to intercept. Nobody leaves this room, Minnie says, and his voice has changed now, flat, final, carrying an authority that has nothing to do with birthdays or hospitality. Sunmi's eyes cut between her son, the woman she struck, and the man now trapped between 2 guards. Minnie, who is that man to you, truly? Someone I trusted with things I shouldn't have, Minnie says, not taking his eyes off Director O. And someone Grace just caught lying to my face without me noticing it myself. Grace doesn't gloat, doesn't allow even a flicker of satisfaction to cross her face. I read people for a living, Mrs. Han. It isn't so different from reading a chart. The truth is always there if you're willing to look past what people are hoping you'll see instead. Sunmi studies her for a long moment, really studies her, perhaps for the first time all evening. You saw all of that, Sunmi says slowly, in the time it took me to slap you and regret it. I saw it in the time it took you to slap me, Grace corrects gently, and confirm it in the time it took you to regret it. Fear makes people careless, Mrs. Han. Yours, his. She glances briefly at Director O. Even mine tonight, if I'm honest. The only difference is what we each choose to do with it. Sunmi crosses the space between them slowly, deliberately, the room holding its breath around her, half expecting a second slap to land before this night is finished with them. Instead, she stops in front of Grace, jaw tight, pride visibly warring with what the room now expects of her. I struck you because of a rumor, she says, the words clipped, costing her something to say at all. That was beneath me. Grace holds her gaze, steady, and doesn't rush to accept it. That's an explanation, Mrs. Han. It isn't yet an apology. Sunmi's composure flickers, not anger this time, something closer to being caught. You want me to grovel in front of 200 people. I want you to mean it, Grace says. The rest is your choice. A long, uncomfortable pause. Nobody in the crowd dares fill the silence. Then, slower this time, something in Sunmi's shoulders finally gives. I was wrong to strike you, she says. I let a rumor decide what my hand should do before my mind had the chance to ask a single honest question. I don't expect that to undo it. It doesn't, Grace agrees. But it's a start. Don't let it happen twice, to me or to anyone else standing in this house. Sunmi nods once, not warmth, not yet, but something closer to respect, grudging and unfinished. You're the first person to speak to me like that in this house in 10 years, Doctor. Then this house has needed someone to for a very long time, Grace says, and there's no unkindness in it, only fact. My husband, Sunmi says suddenly, quieter now, almost to herself. He never told me how bad it was. 6 weeks, and he made it sound like a routine recovery. He didn't want you carrying what he was carrying, Grace says. Some men think love means protecting you from the truth. I've learned it usually just means you find out anyway later from someone else, and it costs you twice. Sunmi looks at her son then, something complicated passing behind her eyes, grief for the years of secrets. not yet gratitude, but something adjacent to it. Queens, this is the moment. A woman who refuses to shrink even in front of the person who just hurt her. If you needed to hear that today, like this video and tell me. Who taught you to hold your ground the way Grace just did? Behind them, Minyi watches the exchange between his mother and the woman he loves with something unreadable crossing his face. Relief? Maybe. Or the first quiet hope that his family and his choice might not have to exist permanently at war with each other after all. Minyi crosses the last of the distance between them, then stops a pace short of her, hand half raised before he lets it fall back to his side. For a moment he says nothing at all, the first time all night his composure looks less like restraint and more like fear. "Say it," Grace says quietly, not moving to close the gap for him. "Or don't, but don't stand there deciding whether I'm worth the cost in front of everyone who's already watching you decide." Something in his jaw sets. He closes the last step and takes both her hands in his, the first unguarded, fully public gesture of the entire night, in front of every guest, every associate, every whispering cousin who came expecting nothing more dramatic than a birthday toast. "I spent 4 months being a coward about this," he says, and his voice carries now, loud enough for the whole ballroom to hear clearly. "Measuring what my name would cost you every single day, and never once asking what our silence was costing us both. That ends tonight, in front of everyone who matters to me and everyone who thought they knew exactly who I was." "You don't need to perform this for them," Grace says quietly, just for him, though she knows as well as he does that every word carries. "I'm not performing," he says. "I'm done hiding you like you're something I should be ashamed of, Grace. You've spent your whole life saving people who never bothered to learn your name first, who saw the coat and not the person wearing it. I'm not going to be one more person who takes everything you give and never says it out loud where it counts." He lifts her hand and turns, finally, to face the party in full. His mother, still and watching. Director O, cornered near the wall by 2 of his own men. The whispering cousins gone entirely quiet. 200 witnesses to a truth that has spent 4 months hiding in plain sight. "This is Dr. Grace Wusu," he says. His voice steady and unmistakably final. "She saved my life. She saved my father's life. And she is the woman I intend to marry, whatever that costs any of us." Sun Mi's champagne glass slips from her fingers, shattering on the marble, an echo of the slap that started the entire night. She doesn't move to pick up the pieces. She simply looks at her son, and then at Grace, and something in her face settles into an expression none of the guests have ever seen on her before, not approval exactly, not yet, but the beginning of it. "Well," she says, quiet enough that only those closest can hear, "I suppose I'll need a better dress for the wedding than the one I ruined tonight." A few guests laugh, nervous and startled, the tension in the room beginning, just barely, to break. Director O, forgotten for a moment in the sudden shift toward something almost like relief, reaches slowly into his jacket. Minyi's head snaps toward the motion, a half-second too late to stop whatever comes next. Queens, if you need episode 2 the moment it drops, subscribe and turn on notifications, because Director O isn't finished tonight, and neither is the truth this family just let loose in front of 200 witnesses. Comment, Grace, below if you're ready for what's coming next.